OpenJ9 community call. As always, please add your name and affiliation to the list of attendees, just so we know who's been joining the calls. And then, as usual, we will pause here for a minute to give people an opportunity to add things to the agenda or to bring up any user-focused questions as well. Then what I'll do is, this is not the only opportunity. If you do have something that comes up, either chime in throughout the call or we'll add it to the end of the agenda in the any other business section. So next week we have a lightning talk scheduled for the null pointer exception messages. So Jason, if you're on the call, just a reminder that you're signed up for that. And then we'll take a look at the user-raised issues, and we'll see if there's anything new that's come in the past week that really needs any extra attention or any call out here. So there's a request around supporting the compiler directive file format and options. So we've handed that to the JIT team to comment. Maybe another way to solve this or address their concern through our existing options as well. Question around Minecraft and compatibilities. And Pete, thank you for tagging people to take a look at that. This looks like it's been assigned, so we're doing okay there. IBM J9 crash. That also looks like there's some discussion happening there. So I don't see anything here that looks like it should be called out in particular. Is there anything else in this list that somebody feels needs some attention or discussion today? Back to the agenda. And just a general reminder around help wanted issues again, that these are a great way to get people started in the project. So, if you do find good entry point issues, please open those up and then leave them for newer contributors to get started with finding their way around compiling and building OpenJ9 and contributing. So we'll also take a look at the downloads dashboard. The J9 numbers. Seeing a slight pickup in the last day, I guess, or last couple of days. Take a look at the hotspot numbers as well. We're seeing a much bigger jump in the last few days. Is anyone aware of what would be accounting for either the slight pickup in the OpenJ9 numbers or the larger jump for hotspot?
It certainly looks like a weekly cycle there with the hotspot numbers.
It does seem to have a definite, yeah. Is it a day of the week thing?
So I've seen that 24th. Where are we? That was yesterday. Tuesday yesterday.
It does seem to be it slows down at the weekend thing, which makes sense to me.
Yeah, and kind of picks up around the Monday, Tuesday of the week.
Yeah.
Back to the 8th as well, 8th, 9th, same kind of jump. Okay, yeah, looks like a weekly cycle. We see less of that cycle with the OpenJ9 downloads though, so that's wondering why we see such different behavior there.
More of a definite downtrend over the month there. A bit peculiar.
We don't seem to have gotten a large peak off the last release either, so. something to be tracking there. Sure there's any action we can take or any deep insight we can get here today, but just worth watching and thinking about.
And you can increase the days, can't you, to get a longer
Let's
perspective on that using the day slider. I think, if I remember
open that
correctly.
back up for a minute.
So the right-hand days, you go, yeah. Does that work? Let it refresh. There we go.
Andrew, can you remember which date it was that we started trying to release? Because I know it's dragged on a bit recently, and I'm wondering if, it's reached that kind of high point in the 50s when we initially tried to release, and then as things have dragged on, people have become, less enthusiastic about the whole thing.
So what was it? About middle of October, wasn't it? The first. Very flat, actually, October.
The Oracle quarterly release day was the 20th. So we would have been a week or so after that.
Yeah.
And then there were the respins. But not all the respins apply to OpenJ9. Complicated further.
It seems unusually flat, actually. What does Hotspot look over the same time period? Definite weekly trend there.
Still slightly down though at the end. You look over at the.
It is, yes. In fact, very slight downtrend the last 3 weeks.
I don't want to take too long on this today.
Yeah, sorry.
So, if you have further thoughts, feel free to add them into the agenda or maybe start a discussion on Slack and dig into this further through that.
Sorry, you kind of trailed off at the end there, Dan.
I said, sorry, not speaking close enough to my mic, I guess. I was saying if there's further thoughts on that, we can either have the discussion in the agenda or can move that discussion into Slack. So we'll move on from that for now, but it's worth continuing to think about what we can do to increase those download numbers.
Did the release get tweeted about?
I don't think it did. As one of the people who runs the Twitter account, I don't recall doing it. I don't know if Mark is on the line and if he was able to do that or not.
Yeah, so I would suggest making sure there's a repeatable plan for making sure people know things are available and what's in them. Even though it seems obvious to people joining this weekly call what's happening, most people in the community do not.
It's a good point. Thanks, Shelley. So we take a look at our upcoming release milestones. We have the 0.24 release coming up, the code split in early December, which doesn't give us a lot of time between now and then. So if we take a look at what's in that list, there are 48 open items here. So if you own an item that's in this plan or are looking for the next item to pick up, please do focus on these items to be either closing them out or moving them forward if appropriate. There are some things here that are tagged with blocker, for example, that we need to make sure are getting the appropriate attention. This one caught my eye, so I'll open it now. So if this is an ongoing problem, if somebody on the P team can take a look at that, that would be helpful.
It's supposed to be under investigation, but it hasn't been showing up lately, so perhaps it's gone away. So I think we'll just keep monitoring it.
Are there any other items in here, Pete, that you want to call out or things that you're concerned about?
There are a few other blockers. I think that one is started showing up quite a bit recently, although it didn't happen last night.
It looks like there's some ongoing discussion here, though.
Yeah.
Stay. Arch 64 hang. It's marked as a blocker. Null pointer exception also not marked as a blocker.
Yeah, so Jason excluded that test, so I guess I could remove the blocker label since it's excluded now.
It was a blocker because of the test failure, or it's a blocker because of the behavior?
So it's a blocker because our goal is to have green tests all the time, and it was causing failures almost every night. So he's working on a fix, but while he's working on the fix, he's excluded the test.
Yeah, there seems to be a couple of these blockers. This one looks like there's a draft PR. If just a reminder to everyone to please be focusing on these items and making sure we can get them closed out. December 6th is always closer than we think it is, and doesn't leave a huge amount of time before people start disappearing for holidays to get everything closed out, even for items that don't make it before that date. And a reminder again around the Java 16 release, which has a code split at the end of January. I believe these are dates that I had penciled in previously as potential targets for these releases. So if anyone does have a concern with these dates or feels they need to be adjusted, please speak up. Then Shelley, can I hand it to you for the regular adopt update?
You can, except I haven't actually finished updating this. I guess this is from last week, so now that we're post-release, I believe there's a plan for the retrospective to happen on Monday, and for Eastern Time folks, that would be Monday afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. All of this stands from last week. You should be seeing additional system tests running in the OpenJ9 builds now because of the work that Simon's been doing. And there's been continued improvement on how we're able to disable and re-enable test targets. So Renfe's been working on extending TKG. Last week he had added the ability to exclude by variation, and he's now merged the ability to exclude by impl or version in a formal way in the playlist. And to remind, the good part about this, or one of the very good parts about this, is us being able to automate the re-enablement of tests once we get some of this stuff in place. I think that's all I'll report on right now, unless others on the project want to say a few words. Nope. That's everything.
Thanks, Shelley. In terms of a machine update, Adam or Joe?
Not much to report. No news is good news, I guess. There's 2 items there in the agenda, but nothing updated to say about those.
It's always good news. So then we'll move on to the any other business section. Babneet, is there anything that you want to call out around the method handles updates?
I wanted to propose a new thing. So currently we review and merge peers. I wanted to propose merge and review. This will help us quicken the development process, and I feel that without peers being merged, we may delay or we may not meet our deadlines. So in order to pursue work concurrently, is it possible to accept this approach just for the OpenJDK method handles work?
So your proposal is to do this in the master branch of OpenJ9?
Yes. Since the code is currently disabled, so it should have no impact on the mainstream project. And reviews can be handled or tracked on the side and done concurrently as we look into other functional issues.
Are you finding the review cycle is significantly delaying things?
I think at this point we will miss our deadline to enable builds by the end of November. And I don't know what kind of functional issues we will face once we enable the builds. And that will determine if we will meet the March deadline or next JDK 16 release deadline for completing this work.
I'll just pause for a minute and give others a chance to weigh in.
I was just going to ask if we had a nightly build that's testing that spec, but I think Babmeet answered when he said end of November. I think that's a no.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think the work has been done so we could turn on a nightly build, but we're just not ready to turn it on yet.
So I think only a few PRs are, one or two PRs are remaining to be merged. If we can make an exception for those two PRs and just for enabling builds, it will fasten the development process.
So if we're talking one or two PRs, can you flag what those are and we can get the reviews sped up for those? My preference is not to be putting in unreviewed code because it's harder to go back and address it after the fact.
I think the PR is pretty big. I think it's still going to take 2 to 3 weeks for it to be properly reviewed. I can add a link to that PR.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Let's start by taking a look at the PR and see what we can do to speed up the reviews.
Okay.
I mean, we could create a temporary branch to merge them into to get a build going. And then once they're reviewed and put into master, then we can delete it.
Yep, that works for me. Because the other issue is we have to keep on constantly rebasing and fixing things because of conflicts, which again delays the development cycle. And currently we are still using JDK 14 and we need to be on JDK 16, so we still haven't identified any missing things we need to support in JDK 16 because our local work branches are out of sync and haven't been rebased.
So using a separate branch won't necessarily help with that. You'll still have to get all the latest stuff into the separate branch all the time.
But then we can still merge unreviewed PRs in them and then
You still have to keep rebasing and tracking masters, I think the point that Pete is making.
okay.
Managing that separate branch for the snapshot work has been a lot of work. So a big shout out and thank you to Daryl, who's primarily been doing the merging on that. So it's not a small task to keep up to date. If you're finding that the PRs are becoming very large, is there a way to break them up into smaller pieces so we can get them merged more quickly?
It's a possibility, but then it will add more work. and still delay enabling of builds. We can have a discussion later.
Yeah, we can.
Don't want to delay the meeting any more.
Yeah, as things stand right now, I'm not in support of a
Understood.
merge and then review. So
Okay.
I think we need to be looking for ways to make this work with our current process. I'm happy to have more discussion later if needed.
Yep. Thank you.
Devin, do we have an update on the CMake migration?
So yeah, it turns out that the Windows issue is probably unrelated to the CMake stuff. It seems to be an intermittent issue that happened to crop up on that first time we did the switch over. Still chipping away at the ZOS stuff, but most of last week I spent working on a CMake presentation I'm going to be giving. So didn't make a lot of headway there. And there is a issue regarding missing symbol names in the dumps or in the crash reports. And it's easy enough to enable them, but I seem to recall from the CMake porting process that has a potential impact on startup and footprint. So I'm going through now and just running benchmarks on the changes and seeing if that was actually the case or I'm just kind of imagining something.
Okay. So it sounds like you're still likely on target to get this enabled on all the main platforms for Java 11 for the upcoming release.
It should already be on for all the main platforms. Windows is already on by default, and that was the last main platform.
Okay, excellent. That's great to hear.
What's the outlook for porting the CMake changes to the headstream?
It should be a pretty trivial task. I think I ran a build the other day just on X Linux, and it was just a matter of just switching the default on head because there's not any real differences from the JDK build side. There's a couple things like when we build the JCL, we add a couple more symbols and whatnot, but I believe I have all of them. So once kind of JDK 11 is finished, it should be a pretty fast process just to get all the other ones up.
It's not a lot of work. Maybe we should do 15 because we can run all the tests for 15 and we know that they pass, whereas for 16, there's probably a bunch of things that aren't working properly right now.
Sure, I'm open to whatever order people think is best to start moving up on JDKs for.
So do we need, besides making it the default, do we need any changes to the code for 15?
We shouldn't. It would basically be running the build and seeing if it fails, and that would dictate if we needed any changes. But I'm not aware of any changes that we would need.
Okay, I'll see if I can set up a series of builds. Hopefully we have all the build stuff in there already.
Yeah, I'd have to double check the build definitions just to make sure that if you actually tell it to build 15, that it knows how to do it. Like in terms of, it's just in one of the Jenkins files, you just need to add 15 to the name of the supported list of versions that the CMake build does.
So let's do that if it needs to be done, and then we could set up a build to test all the tests on all platforms over the weekend.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, Devin. Is there an update on the Kubernetes Helm and operator discussion?
So we are at the last round of reviews. So these are performed actually in Chris's private repo. So we are very close of putting those back into the original PR. But I'm thinking that instead of doing that, so the original PR was targeting the OpenJ9 master branch. Maybe a better home for this, at least for the time being, is OpenJ9 utils repo. So I was wondering what's your opinion on that?
That seems reasonable to me to target that repo instead of the master branch.
Yeah.
Especially
okay, so,
given the size of some of the changes in these PRs.
Yeah, this PR in itself is not that big. So it's not the operator one. Maybe we'll follow up with an operator one. That one's the big one. But the help chart is not that big. Okay, so I'm going to create, I'm going to tell Chris to put these new changes into the OpenJ9 utils repo. Create a PR there, and then everybody will be welcome to review.
Sounds good.
Do we need a CQ for that?
It depends how big the contribution is. There's a number of lines.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's 1,000. I'll have to count, or there are statistics about that. I'll see. Many of these files are actually auto-generated. So there's a script that will generate templates. But if it's just based on number of lines, I'll have to see how many they are, and maybe I'll file a CQ. It shouldn't be a problem.
The CQ process has gotten pretty quick, so.
If there's additional licenses involved, it's probably a good idea to do a CQ.
Okay, we'll do it then. Yeah, that's all from me.
Do we have an update on the microJIT progress?
Hi. For the most part, I think we're just going to do the updates on microJIT in the microJIT meetings, but I'll keep this any other business line here so that people know when the next meeting is, and they'll have a notification, the day before a meeting at the very least.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. For the CanOSP project, I know I've seen the.
So I took over that project, or at least a PR. So there was a PR being created again at OpenJ9 utils. I've created 2 CQs for that, one for the original contribution, which has already been approved, and one for the JSON HTTP file. And this is pending IP review because there is some included file that has a Creative Commons license. So we need for the IP team to look it over. And I already started to review the PR. There are about 2,100 lines of code.
Okay. Thanks, Marius. The compressed and default story, I think we've talked about this. Is there any update that needs to be made here today?
So I discussed, is Len on the call? I discussed some changes with Len this week. So I think we're going to turn on some additional modes for system tests to get ready for testing mixed builds so that system tests would, in theory, be testing both compressed and non-compressed, but in the builds that we're running now, only one of those exists, so that all the other modes would just be, those tests wouldn't run. And I think there was something else, but I can't remember what it was. But Lan's going to go ahead and start making those changes.
Yes, so Lan, Renfei, Gak, and I will be chatting later today to probably discuss those changes. And the OMR and OpenJ9 changes have been approved. So pending any additional changes from the meeting with Lan, we'll probably do some PR pipeline building and tests from there.
Great, thanks, Sharon. And then the intention is to have this ready to enable for JDK 16?
I don't think there's been a specific target set up, but I think that is a reasonable target for this work.
A reminder again to add stop ship criteria into the discussion there, especially as we get closer to the upcoming releases. Having this clarified ahead of the release will certainly help. Is there any other business people want to discuss today? All right, then thank you, everybody, and we'll have the next call on December the 2nd.
A quick FYI, I was just looking at the Java 16 plan. I noticed that field class's second preview is proposed for target.
Okay. Had seal class's second preview not already been targeted to 16?
I guess not, because it just got proposed with the review ending on December 1st.
I had assumed it was already there, so I'm not as surprised to hear that, I guess. Thanks for calling. I don't know that there's that many changes that would be needed there, given what I've seen in the discussions around sealed classes. Only one I can think of maybe in relation to that was related to records. So I'm not aware of any major changes in the sealed classes specs.
There are some changes in regards to class loading, just the type of exceptions that are being thrown. But beyond that, I'm not aware of anything major.
So I don't see that we have an issue at OpenJ9 for that, Jep, so I'll create one after this call. Also, the branching is supposed to occur on December 10th. I guess we got a couple of weeks, but we'll have to make a new repo and set up our builds properly. I guess I probably own making the new repo, which could be interesting because I've never done that before.
That's a new extensions repo?
Yeah.
Jason has the instructions for doing that stuff.
Okay.
You can always ping me, obviously.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, then if there's nothing else, we'll call things here. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.